Hello everyone, my name is John Michael Bushman and welcome to hopefully the first of many set reviews. I guess this is what I'll call it for Magic the Gathering. So if you've been on my channel for a while, you should see that while I mainly post Yu-Gi-Oh content, I also mentioned in passing that I also play Magic the Gathering. And one of my oh my god, I am tongue-tied right now. So one of the formats I play is a format called Pauper, where only commons are being used. And this will be basically me looking through all of the cards in this at the common rarity and see if they will be viable in Pauper. I've played at the pre-release at this point, and I've had a taste for what these commons can do. And good god, some of these are better than I give them credit for. Like, holy shit. So we're gonna go through, wait, how many are they? 106 common cards and see if they will make any impact at all in Pauper. So here we go. And I arranged it by color, and I think we're here on Scryfall, and all of the cards have been revealed by this point, and I've zoomed in so that we can, see 4 cards at a time at the very least. So yeah, we're gonna go through it. First, here on the left, Argivian Cavalier. It's a 3-mana 2/2 with Enlist, and when it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1. So it's basically 3 mana for 3 power across 2 bodies. And Enlist is a mechanic that a lot of people honestly downplay and sometimes wholly not impressed. I was a non-believer bit at first, but after playing pre-release and seeing Enlist in action, at the very least in a limited card pool environment, Enlist is really good. And it will probably take a lot more testing for Enlist cards to see competitive viability in actual constructed. But as far as I see, Enlist is a really underrated mechanic. It's going to be a heavily underrated mechanic because of the very restriction that it needs, where you need a creature without summoning sickness for it to work. So 3 mana for 3 mana across 2 bodies are given Cavalier. This might see play in white X decks. As if Boros Bully or Boros, whatever flavor of Boros, doesn't get enough toys. Like, Jesus Christ, Argivian Cavalier might help, but in the 3-drop slot, they have removal spells, and they'd prefer to keep their curve at 1 and 2, so that they can attack as often as possible. And some of them even have the hot dogs variants now, because good god, Monastery Swift Spear has shaken up the format quite significantly. This is something to keep an eye out for. Next is Argivian Phalanx. This is part of a cycle of overcosted creatures that can reduce their casting cost by a certain amount if you meet a condition. In this case, the Phalanx reduces its cost by 1 for each creature you control, so it could potentially be a 1-mana 4/4 with Vigilance. This I don't see the white decks having a lot of this. This will probably only be a 1 of, maybe even 2 if they want to be spicy like that. The Boros X decks will probably make the best use out of this, since they can spam tokens onto the board willy-nilly. So also another card to watch out for. Next, Artillery Blast. It's a 2-mana instant. It's basically removal. Deals X damage to target tapped creature, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types. So this is for the domain sub-theme in the limited environment. It's good when it works, but when you have to basically build your deck around domain for the domain cards to work. I'm not sure how competitively viable that is in Pauper, but who knows. Right now, I'm gonna say we're only 3 cards in. I'll tell you guys right now, they're far better and smarter deck builders than I am. And white and blue are not exactly my colors, but these first 3 cards are stuff to watch out for. Next is Benalish Fate Bonder, 2 mana 1/3 with Vigilance and Enlist. This is honestly a really good blocker, and it could also enlist itself, so it can become 2-3, or if you're gonna pair it with, like, say, the next card here, Benalish Sleeper, it can be a 4-3, like, good god, but it will, more often than not, it will probably only be attacking for, like, 2 power, and has Vigilance, so it's good on blocks as well, like, holy shit. This, basically, decks that can draft this guy, they will wreck you more often than not in limited. Definitely to look out for in Pauper. All right, next row we have Benalish Sleeper, a 2-mana 3/1. Basically, it's an edict effect, and you need to be in Orzhov to be able to use this. So it's basically similar to other creatures that are 3-mana edicts, like Fleshbag Marauder. There's also Demon's Disciple and oh god, what was that other one? The one from Ravnica Allegiance. Basically, it's this is the dual color one. Kicker is also a mechanic that returns for Dominaria United, and yeah, it's basically a sorcery speed edict. Although if you don't need to edict it, it's 3/1. Something to watch out for, but in Pauper there are far better removal spells. Next is Captain's Call, 4 mana to create 3 bodies. This is definitely just for limited. In Pauper at least, Battle Screech can create tokens at a better rate, and you can even flash it back. So this will probably just be in the bargain bin. Same with Charismatic Vanguard, a 3-mana 3/2, which is just a temporary anthem, but somehow if you create infinite mana, you can infinitely pop your creatures, but that's a commander thing. So yeah, also probably hitting the bargain bin, but you know, 3-mana 3/2, not bad. Citizen's Arrest, this will definitely see play in Pauper. This is basically another copy of stuff like Journey to Nowhere and Oblivion Ring. Although the worst part about it are its 2 white pips, so you need to be heavily into white to be able to use this. So like blue-white decks, or you know, hell, Boros decks again, they're definitely gonna use this. But again, I'm not sure how many they'll have, since having double white on turn 3, while not impossible in Pauper, it's going to be very hard given how many decks need to run tap lands so that they can fix their colors. Next is Clockwork Drawbridge, a 1-mana 0/3 with Defender, and has a tap ability that taps a creature. There's a Defender sub-theme in Pauper. I'm not sure how this will go into Walls combo in Pauper. It's a 1-drop, 0/3. It will definitely block Swift Spear if you're on the play. But, you know, by the time they play their Swift Spear anyway, they probably just bolt that thing out of the way first before they attack with their Swift Spear. And you'll take 2 damage anyway, but at least it's damage to the creature on board rather than your face. But, you know, this is probably for Commander. Oh, let me have a drink of water. So, probably highly likely only be in Commander. Arcades and Doran actually got a lot of sweet toys in Dominaria United. But, you know, highly likely bargain bin, but we'll see. Next is Destroy Evil, a 2-mana instant that destroys a creature with toughness 4 or greater, or destroys target enchantment. This will destroy a lot of there are a lot of walls, creatures with big butts in the limited environment for Dominaria United, and it can also destroy a target enchantment, which is, speaking of, Citizen's Arrest. If deck has white, they will highly likely run this as a removal, and this is your sideboard option if you're also running white. But otherwise, this is honestly only for limited, so there's that. But, you know, something to look out for if you're playing Commander. But, you know, when you're playing Commander, there are far better options, unfortunately. Like, you know, just Disenchant. Next is Griffin Protector. I'm not going to read this card. This is highly likely just for limited to round out your curve and whatnot. So, yeah, bargain bin for sure. Heroic Charge, 6 mana for +2/+1 and Trample. I'm not sure how competitively viable that is. There's a pump spell that the Boros decks use that does what this thing does at a far better rate. So unfortunately, this will only end up in the bargain bin. Next is Juniper Order Root Weaver. 2 mana 2/2 with kicker. Put the +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. 3 mana for a. I mean, it can pump it. It can put the counter on itself, so it's essentially a 3 mana 3/3. But I'm not sure how competitively viable this is. Although it's something to watch out for, but Celestia decks are not exactly popular in Pauper unless you're a life gain deck, which is like an anti-meta pick. Well, this is me just spitballing here. I don't check the meta too often. But, you know, a 2 mana 3/3 can definitely stonewall aggressive decks for days. But, you know, with Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning being in the format, I'm not sure if this is competitively viable. Next is Mesa Cavalier, 3 mana 2/1, enters the battlefield, gains 2 life. Probably made for Blink decks in Commander. Pauper, you can also like use Ephemerate on this, repeatedly gain life, you know, stuff. This is basically usable against aggro and whatnot, but otherwise, this is just, you know, to fill out your curve in Limited. Next is Samite Herbalist. This card, my god, facing down this thing in Limited is insane. If you have, basically, if you've built around Enlist and you have Samite Herbalist, run it in the deck. Sure, it's only a 2/1, but if you enlist Samite Herbalist, the creature that's enlisting it will get a +2 in power. And if Samite Herbalist becomes tapped, gain 1 and scry. The gain 1 scry 1 is what broke this card, this for me. Like, holy shit, this card is a lot better than I gave it than I originally gave it credit for. If you can run this, please leave in the comments if you can, if you know, you please experiment with it. I'm gonna see, I will highly likely see this in more controlling Pauper decks from this point onward, because the scry 1 just cannot be ignored, and the gain 1 as well. Like, Jesus Christ. Stall for time, literally what it says, stall for time. The stun counter mechanic is honestly a really nice twist on suspend. Well, I call it suspend. It basically keeps your targets tapped down for a turn, or depending on the number of X counters on it. Let me have another drink of water. And also draws a card, but 5 mana to tap down 2 things, and basically, you know, as the counters imply, to stun them for a turn. This has actually saved me on multiple occasions during the pre-release, and sure, 5 mana for this effect is okay, and you also get to draw a card, but in Limited, sure, it's just okay. But when you're in Constructed, there are unfortunately far better removal spells. Take Up the Shield is our last white common. +1/+1 counter on target creature, gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. What really sells this for me is the +1 counter, but, you know, getting lifelink and indestructible until end of turn at instant speed, by the way, so I'm not sure how. I mean, for me, this is a nice card, but when you're in actual Constructed, you're competing with a lot of other things, unfortunately. And there are, like, better ways to protect your stuff and such. Oh, now that I'm thinking about it, Bogles could potentially use this to save their stuff, but then they have Karametra's Blessing, which gives +2/+2 and hexproof, if I'm not mistaken. It can be used to protect your creature better. This puts a more permanent buff in a counter, but it's only a +1. So that is something to look out for. Next are the blue cards. Next is Academy Wall, so another wall here for Defender Tribal. This is actually sneakily good. Arcades decks could definitely use this, although Arcades decks in Commander are generally more creature heavy. It's a draw and discard, although it triggers only once each turn, but sometimes it's more than enough. And, you know, in Limited, it does what it needs to do, especially if you need to quote unquote stall for time. I don't drink. Next we have Essence Scatter. This is just sideboard tech. Always good to have it. In Limited, sure, but in actual Constructed, you have actual factual counter spells. Next is Haunting Figment, 2/1 with Vigilance, can't be blocked as long as you've cast an instant or sorcery this turn. I mean, it doesn't fly, so it can be blocked like 50% of the time. But if you build around it a bit, I guess, it could potentially be, attacking for 2 every turn. Probably not. I'm thinking about blue-white control, heck, even blue-red, if you want to be spicy about it. I can see this being played, since, 2 damage is 2 damage. And on a Vigilant body, I mean, yeah, sure, why not? Next is Impede Momentum. This is an all-star in the limited environment. It basically takes away one of your opponent's attackers, or heck, even one of the defenders, for 3 turns. And hopefully that will give you enough time to assemble your victory. And the Scry one is just cherry on top. The one thing that breaks this card for me, unfortunately, is that it's sorcery speed. But I guess that's a balancing thing. If this were an instant, this would be insane in Pauper. Speaking of being insane in Pauper, Impulse. This has already been in Pauper for a while, but this reprint is actually speaking bigger volumes than you think, because this is the first time Impulse is going to be legal in Modern downwards. This has only been legal in Legacy and Pauper, and now it's finally getting a more, well, I guess, modern reprint. So you can finally replace your Anticipates, because Impulse digs 1 card deeper. Negate is Negate. Like, do I really need to say anymore? Negate is a classic counter spell. Well, it only counters non-creature spells, but it's Negate. Phyrexian Espionage. It's a 5 mana spell that lets you draw 2 cards, and if you kicked it, each opponent discards a card. It's just divination with an extra upside. I don't think this is competitively viable outside of limited. Pixie Illusionist, same thing. This is probably only for limited. Unfortunately, fairies aren't exactly common in in Pauper. Well, unless you're like blue-red, but mono blue, and this has a splash of green, so there's that. But target land you control becomes the basic land type of your choice. This is to highly likely help the domain decks, but otherwise you can just pass this one up. Shore Up, though, target creature gets +1/+1 against hexproof until end of turn, and then you untap it. This will basically turn one of your tapped creatures into a really effective blocker, or just save it from removal. Something to keep an eye out for. Next is Soaring Drake, a 2 mana 2/3 with flying. I mean, probably only for limited, unfortunately, so it won't see any play beyond that. Tala's Lookout, unfortunately, the way I see it, is also only for limited. 4 mana 3/2, and if it had its effect when it entered the battlefield, it would have been a lot better. But the fact that it has to die means you have to jump through a few extra hoops in order to get its effects. So unfortunately, a no on this one. Tidepool Turtle, it's just a big booty. A big booty with in Commander, if you somehow manage to make infinite blue mana, you scry one in an infinite number of times, basically stack your deck the way you want it to. So yeah, there's that. But unfortunately, no. Timely Interference, this is I'm not sure how competitively viable this is. Basically 3 mana, and then target creature blocks this turn if able. I guess, but no. 3 mana to draw one, probably not. So there are better ways to spend 3 mana in Pauper. Next is Tolarian Geyser. 3 mana, sorcery, bounces a creature, draws a card. If you kicked it, gain 3 life. You're only really using this. It's basically a 3 mana bounce spell that replaces itself. I'm not sure how competitively viable this is, but it's something to keep an eye out for. Next is Tolarian Terror. Again, part of the cycle of creatures that will reduce their cost if you meet a condition. This one reduces its cost for counting the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. And to top it all off, it has Ward fucking 2. Why did it have to have Ward 2? It makes it extra hard to remove, god damn it! Only Edict effects can get through it now. My god. I mean, Ward 2 is not that hard to get by because Pauper is slow enough that you can have like 6 mana on turn 6 and still not be dead. So there's that. But Dimir Fairies is a thing, and they can load up their graveyard relatively quickly, especially with like 4 to 5 instants and or sorceries by turn 4. So this is probably dropping down by then. Good God, like this is insane. These, I call it reverse delve, and creatures like these are what makes Pauper so frustratingly fun sometimes. Well, not sometimes. It's all the time. Let's be real here. Next is Voda Sea Scavenger. Again, another one of the domain cards. Not that good. Again, if you really want to build a domain deck for Pauper, you really have to go out of your way to screw up your... Well, I call it screw up, but if you're going to have to sacrifice your mana base just to, trigger domain often, I honestly think it's not worth it. Next is Volsh. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Volsh or Volshe, well, whichever. Volsh, I'll just call it Volsh. Volsh type Turner, 2 mana 1/3. It's a mana dork for instants and sorceries, and or kick spells. It's okay, I guess. It's first. There's a Spellslinger sub theme in limited. This will probably also go in like budget Spellslinger decks in Commander, but otherwise, keep it in mind for the budget minded. But otherwise in Pauper, probably no. Alright, next we have the black cards. Aggressive Sabotage, 3 mana. 3 mana, target player discards 2 cards if it was kicked, deal 3 damage to that player. 4 mana, discard 2, deal 3. I'm probably overrating this. It's better than it looks. But when I drafted this in PR, it didn't do what I wanted it to do, unfortunately. 3 mana, discard 2, Mind Rot is like such a common effect. This is just Mind Rot with extra upside, and you have to pay 4 mana for it. Yeah, no. Probably, highly likely, honestly, only for limited. Next is Battlefly Swarm. This I'm definitely high on in Pauper. It's a 1-drop with that flies. It doesn't cost you life like Vault Scourge does, and it can gain Death Touch. So it's good on offense, also good on defense. Definitely keep an eye out for this one. Battle Rage Blessing. This is honestly highly likely only for limited, but the combination of Death Touch and Indestructible is surprisingly good. Now that I'm looking at it, but highly likely only for limited. Bone Splinters, getting a reprint again. It's a 1 mana removal that requires you to sacrifice a creature. Good removal is good, especially in limited, but otherwise, in Pauper, there are far better removal spells, aka Cast Down. Next is Eerie Soul Tender, 3 mana 3/1, enters the battlefield, mill 3, exile from the graveyard. You basically regrow a creature from your graveyard to your hand. There are better ways to do this, unfortunately. You're basically spending, 2 plus 5, that's, or rather, 3 plus 5, 8 mana to get this effect, unfortunately. There are better ways, so highly likely only for limited. Jaya, why did you have to die? Next, moving on. Gibbering Barricade, 3 mana 2/4, Defender Tribal again. Of note, this will probably see play in budget commander decks because it's a sacrifice outlet. Although it's not a free sacrifice outlet, a sacrifice outlet is still a sacrifice outlet. So if you're a commander and you're running black, you should definitely keep the Gibbering Barricade in the back of your mind. Next is Phyrexian Rager. This is a Pauper All-Star. If you're playing heavy black, you should run at least one of these. I have not seen a black deck that didn't already run this, and, drawing one to lose one while adding to the board will always be good. Next is Phyrexian Vivisector. This is basically Viscera Seer that doesn't need to sacrifice a creature. Although 2 mana 2/2, just a Grizzly Bear, but, whenever a creature dies, just scry one. I mean, this will always be good. It will always be good. And especially in the color that it's in, it gets a thumbs up from me. Next is Phyrexian Warhorse. 4 mana 3/3 with a kicker of white. If it was kicked, you create a soldier. This is also a sacrifice outlet, although a tad bit more expensive than the Gibbering Barricade here. Probably will not see more play since you know, there are better ways to go about this. It's a little too overcosted for me, but again, there are smarter deck builders than I am, and there are people who can theory craft better than I do. But in Commander, at the very least, again, this is another budget option for you to consider. Next is Shadow Prophecy, another one of those domain cards. Again, if you're gonna build around domain, you could probably screw yourself over by just trying to make the mana work. But, you know, something, at least it's something to keep an eye on. Because you could potentially look at the top 5. It's basically 3 mana, look at top 5, get 2. You're basically looking at 5 cards and get the 2 best out of them. So, something to keep in mind. And then we have Splatter Goblin. If it dies, target creature and opponent controls gets -1/-1. This could help pick off X1s. Like, say, when you're in Pauper, if this dies, you can pick off, like, a Priest of Titania or any of the annoying goblins in the... I don't know. I'm not sure how viable actual aggro goblins is, but combo goblins, you can use this to... Oh, now that I think about it, you could put this in, like, You could put this in, like, the sideboard of combo goblins as a way to... pick off X1s, but you have makeshift munitions there anyway, so yeah, jumping through the extra hoop. Yeah, I talked myself out of it. No, Splatter Goblin is probably only for, like, niche decks. Speaking of niche, Started Apparition, I'm not even gonna talk about it. This is highly likely only for limited. Toxic Abomination is a card that I'm personally high on. It's a 3 mana 3/2. Like, what's 2 life in Pauper? And you're in mono black control has a lot of removal. It has a lot of ways to control your opponent's draws. This is something I'm gonna keep an eye out for because I really like this card for Pauper. And I will not be surprised if I see more of this in the future. Next up, Tribute to Urborg. It's essentially a 4 mana instant. It gets an additional buff for each instant sorcery in the graveyard. So for 4 mana, it could potentially kill something that's more than 3 toughness. Otherwise, the hoops you have to jump through, and it only hits 1 creature. So this is probably going into the Fairies deck, but there are better ways. They have better ways to remove creatures. So yeah, it gets a no from me. Urborg Repossession is sorcery. Return target creature card from graveyard to hand. Gain 2 life. It was kicked. Return another target permanent instead. So 3 mana for the effect. I mean, 1 mana to regrow something is already good enough. So there's that. But when Pulse of Marasa exists, and it's an instant, and you gain 6 life, Urborg Repossession seems slow in comparison. But, you know, something to keep an eye out for at least. Writhing Necromass, a lot of people are already, like, taking this into their standard decks even. I'm not sure how good this is in formats like, say, Modern. But Pauper definitely, when a lot of stuff ends up in the graveyard far more often, basically almost similar to their Legacy counterpart. This will highly likely end up costing like only 1 to 2 mana at the very most, because of how quickly graveyards fill in that format. And it also doesn't have Death Touch. It has fucking Death Touch, so it can stonewall for days. Like, holy shit. Alright, moving on to the red cards. Coalition Warbrute. I am not even gonna read this card. This is only for limited. Flowzone Infusion. This is either a pump spell or a removal spell. So, this actually gets around a lot of indestructible stuff in Pauper. Or if they can even make it that. Especially if the creature is, yeah, like I said, if it's indestructible, minus X effects are the only ones that can get through it. So, it's something to keep in mind, but, you know, don't hold your breath over it. Flowstone Kavu, 3 mana 2/3 with Menace. There are probably better ways to spend 3 mana in Pauper, so this gets a no from me. Furious Bellow, +3/+0 and first strike, and then Scry 1. Again, better ways, but you know, the Hot Dogs deck will highly likely make use of this because of the Scry 1, and the first strike also helps, but that deck would rather have double strike and or trample rather than just first strike. But the +3 power is not that bad, honestly, in my opinion, but keep it in your back pocket at the very least. Gitto Amplifier, this is essentially what? 2, 3, yeah, 5 mana for the kicked effect, and there are better ways, but this will go in a with, although the buff that it gives itself +2/+0, it will probably see play in is it Blitz? But again, smarter people than me, it's a 1/2, so it dies to a lot of things. So, but it's a wait and see card. Goblin Picker, it's just a rummage. It's a goblin with a rummage. That nothing more to say about that. Hammerhand, basically gives a, I think there's a reprint if I'm not mistaken, as with some of the other cards here. I mean, it +1/+1 in haste, sure, but there are better ways, unfortunately. Enthrall to the Pit, gain control of target creature, 4 mana to get the effect, and then Kicker, better ways, unfortunately. That gets a no as well. Fire Nado, better damage spells in the format, unfortunately, so this also gets a pass. And we move on to Keldon Strike Team. Oh my god! Keldon Strike Team is insane! Like, if Boros decks weren't already, like, foaming over the mouth, this is probably what will send it over the top. Because even if you don't kick it, 3 mana to give your whole team haste until end of turn, good god! And it even gives haste to itself. Like, holy shit. This card is so goddamn good for decks that can go wide. Please put this in your Boros X decks. This is way too good. Next is Lightning Strike. It's finally here once again. After what? A couple of years. So there's that. Jaya though had to die. Maria's Outrider. Again, Domain. Probably no. Molten Monstrosity. Another one of those creatures in that cycle of creatures that will reduce their cost if you meet a condition. This one checks to see for the greatest power. This will highly likely see play in Reanimator decks. They're basically the only decks in the format that will have enough power to reduce this thing to 1, maybe even 4, maybe even by 4 or 5. But otherwise, the trample helps though. Actually, the trample helps push through some damage. So there's that. But very niche. But I personally like it. Smash to Dust. This is basically Electricary with extra upside. But the fact that it's a sorcery is what irks me about it, unfortunately. Although, to destroy a target artifact at sorcery speed, you know, you can hit the artifact lands with this thing. So there's that. Destroy target creature with Defender. How often is that gonna come up? So no. Something to keep in your back pocket, but otherwise, pass it over. Thrill of Possibility. Always good to have a reprint of this. Viashino Branch Rider. Again, probably only for limited. So there's that. It's a 1 mana 1/1 with haste. No, unfortunately. Oh, excuse me. Yavimaya Steel Crusher. It's basically 3 mana, destroy target artifact land. So, unfortunately, no. Next, we move on to the green cards. Barkwave Crusher. Probably only, highly likely only for limited. It basically rounds out your Enlist deck if you've been building towards it. Bite Down is interesting, honestly. This is a removal spell for the Green X decks in Pauper. I've seen a lot of decks, you know, replace some of their removal spells already. Or rather in Green X decks, you know, replace some of their removal spells for this. Especially if their creature is too big to be taken down by the opposing board. But something to keep in your back pocket at the very least. Next is Bog Badger, 4 mana, 3/3. Creatures will gain mana until end of turn. I mean, why not? Helps push through damage. But probably only for limited. Same with Broken Wings. I mean, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Highly likely only for limited. Colossal Growth, same deal. Probably only for limited. Deathloom Gardener. For elves, I guess. It's a 3 mana 1/1 with Death Touch. I mean, could have been worse. But probably only for limited. Although, at the very least, More mana dorks are always nice. Helps you, fix your colors. This one adds 1 mana of any color anyway, so helps fix your colors. Elfame Worm, I think there's a Worms sub-theme in Limited, but otherwise this just helps round out your curve. Floriferous Vine Wall, this is a dig. It's a dig. It's a dig that looks at 6 cards. Like, what more could you want? And it thins out the land as well. Holy shit! This looks bad. This is probably worse than it looks, but keep an eye out for it at least. Gaia's Might receiving its first reprint after like decades. Like, holy shit! But otherwise, Domain, again, you'd have to build around it, so it's a pass. Hexbane Tortoise, it's a 3 mana 3/2 with Ward 2 and Enlist. The Enlist is something you can ignore with this thing, but the Ward 2 is interesting at the very least. So something to keep in your back pocket, but in the 3-drop slot, there are probably better options. Llanowar Stalker, this will highly likely go in Elves decks, since that deck can barf out creatures like nobody's business. Though I'm not sure if it will replace any of the elves that are already in the deck, since that deck in particular needs as many of its mana dorks as it can, so that it can accelerate much further than their opponent. But otherwise, something to keep in your back pocket. Magnigot Sentry, it's a 4 mana 4/4 reach. I mean, it's a blocker for flyers. Scout the Wilderness, probably, unfortunately, only for Limited. Snare Spinner, this is, honestly, it helps stonewall, like, small flying threats in the format. But when you have Penumbra Spider, I don't see the purpose of this thing. Sunbathing Rootwalla, again, only for Limited. Pass on this one. Same with Vine Shaper Prodigy. There are far better ways to spend 4 mana in the format. Yavimar Sojourner is the worst of the creatures in its cycle, since this will always only be a 3 mana 4/6, unfortunately, unlike its bigger brethren earlier. And yeah, we move on to the artifacts. Automatic Librarian. This I'm honestly scared for, since Tron decks can make full use of this. Like, holy shit, I am horrified. It's 3 mana with Scry 2. As if Tron didn't need any more help. I may be overrating it, but I'm scared at what this deck can do for Pauper. Next is Meteorite. 5 mana, deal 2 to something, and then it becomes a mana rock. Sure, but there are better ways to spend that much mana in this format. But again, there are probably people who will lap better than I will. Salvage Mana Worker. Why is it only activate only once each turn? It could have been so much better. Probably only for Limited. Shield Wall Sentinel. This helps round out your Defender Tribal Limited pool. So there's that. But in Pauper, probably no. Vanquisher's Axe, only for Limited, unfortunately. And then the non-basic lands are actually really, really spicy, since they're all named. Rather, the basic land types are named and they can be fetched out. Of note, Crystal Grotto. Listen, this card, Pauper, Tron, Lost, Prophetic Prism. Okay? Pauper, Tron, Lost, Prophetic Prism. This is what they've been needing for the longest goddamn time, ever since that card was banned out of the format. Tron may be able to splash colors all over again, solely thanks to this card. Of all of the cards that I am high on at the common slot in this set, Crystal Grotto is like the best for last. This card is so goddamn good, especially for Tron. Pauper Tron players, please do not sleep on this card. And with that, before I get way too excited, we're gonna stop here. And that is it for me looking through all of the common cards from Dominaria United, and if they are competitively viable in Pauper or not. So yeah, I hope to make more of this in future. And with more sets coming out, more sets coming out, and the Brothers War, magic going back to the past in order to the future and whatnot. So yeah, there'll be more coming. Whew, I managed to string together that sentence pretty well. Haha. But yeah, if you like what you saw, hit like, comment, subscribe, and share it among your friends. And until next time, toodles!